Hello, and welcome to Knowledge 11, Lesson 6. This is another about Lewis and Clark, and this is The Journey Begins. Now, a word that we're going to learn here is expedition. What is an expedition? An expedition, of course, is a group of people traveling together for a special reason, such as exploring. All right. Oh, and there's one more thing. Corps. What is a corps? Now, corps is spelled C-O-R-P-S. Yeah, that comes from French, where a lot of letters aren't pronounced. Corps. A corps is a group of people, like you may have heard of the Marine Corps. That's a group of people working together. All right, let's get to Lewis and Clark. The journey begins. Now, before they began their exploration of the Louisiana Territory, Meriwether Lewis traveled to Indiana to join William Clark, his friend, and gather their team of explorers. Lewis explained, "As I wrote in my letters, Will, because the United States government is paying for this exploration, we will travel as members of the U.S. Army. I asked that we be made co-captains so we would have equal command over our men." Soon they traveled to the city of St. Louis, where the wide Missouri River flows into the even mightier Mississippi. Now, if you have a chance, you might want to look up where the Missouri River meets the Mississippi. Pretty neat place to put a big city, huh? St. Louis was a frontier town at the time. Its streets and stores bustled with hunters and trappers who had chosen to live far beyond the more settled cities of the East. The two captains knew that it would take courage, intelligence, and skill to reach the Pacific. So they looked for people who knew how to survive in forests and on rivers and mountains. These people would need to know how to hunt and fish for food and how to build shelters in which they could stay warm, dry, and safe. Remember, there were no houses or hotels in the Louisiana Territory. People had to make their own shelters to sleep in. Some were Americans who had grown up in Virginia or Pennsylvania and who had later moved farther west to live in Kentucky. Others were Canadians from the country north of the United States who spoke French and English. The two captains finally put together a team of trusted men who were daring and brave enough for the expedition. Remember, an expedition is a group of people traveling together for a special reason. Among the men who joined Lewis and Clark's group, one man stood out. He appeared before them one day dressed half in manufactured clothing and half in animal skins that were favored by woodsmen. "I am George Drouillard," he told them. "I hear you are going all the way to the Pacific. Ask the others you have already hired about me. They know all about me. I speak French, English, and some Native American languages. I can help you communicate with your men and many Native people that you meet. I also know the hand signs languages that used by Native Americans who live out on the Great Western Plains. When different tribes meet, they use this sign language, since their spoken language are not all the same. I can ask them about the country ahead and help them understand that you have come in peace." Well, that's helpful to have someone like George Drouillard. You have to be able to communicate with people. Anyway, here you see what's called a pirogue and a keelboat. Okay? They had to put their supplies and people together, and they needed to take a lot of things with them on their trip. So they purchased some long, narrow canoes. So the one at the top there is called, that's called a pirogue, right? and they bought a larger, wider boat called a keel boat. That's the one with the pole on it and the strings. That's a keel boat. On the deck of the keel boat, there was a little cabin that they could store supplies in. And riders in the pirogues moved their narrow boats forward using canoe paddles, but the keel boat had a sail. Moving the keel boat was slower and more difficult than moving a pirogue. Figure you've got the wind helping you with a pirogue. When a strong enough wind was behind the riders, it pushed the keel boat along, but if there wasn't any wind, the men had to take turns pushing and pulling it with poles and ropes. So, on Monday, May 14th, 1804, the explorers were ready. They called themselves the Corps of Discovery. And that's Corps, C-O-R-P-S, like I said before. Corps is a group of people working together. Now they would leave St. Louis and travel west along the Missouri River, as President Jefferson had requested. And one of them, Private John Whitehouse, wrote in his diary that day, "We hoisted our sail and set out in high spirits for the Western expedition." At last, they were on their way. And that's it for this story. Our next will be Discovery and Danger on the Prairie. We'll find out some of their encounters with Native Americans and some other things that they found along the way. So keep listening and learning.